Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this content in MHA's 26, where the theme this week, the topic this week is privacy, confidentiality, security, and the ethical and legal issues surrounding these topics. Now, my guess is that all of you are familiar with these topics, especially if you've had any experience working in healthcare. Um, much more so from a compliance perspective. We're going to take it in a slightly different direction. There are some excellent readings, short videos in this week's in the module this week, and we'll also be tackling a discussion board as well based on the topic. So why don't we get started here? So let's see if I can do this. Oh, well, here we are. At the end of this module, each of you hopefully will be able to identify some of the key issues and distinguish between these three concepts, especially as it's concerning health information and how that health information is transmitted. Certainly, we will speak about HIPAA, which all of you are familiar with, but in a slightly different vein. So let's keep going. I want to go through each of the three topic areas, confidentiality, privacy, and security, uh, and then highlight some examples that I think many of you are familiar with, some of you might not be, and then also really categorize those. So the first is confidentiality, and I'm titling this balancing interest because it really is a balance. It's not so much a black and white issue. On the surface, it might be. We are certainly led through HIPAA compliance to believe that, but the nuances, especially when it comes to the ethical and legal issues, are a lot more gray. So, confidentiality refers to the obligation primarily of healthcare professionals because they have access to patient communication, whether that be verbal communication, whether that be results, tests, electronic information, but it's the responsibility and obligation to hold that information in confidentiality, um, confidential. That should be confidential, shouldn't it? Okay, so excuse the typo. But there are certainly layers of confidentiality that exist, and as we, let's say, speak to individuals, um, calling patients, families on the phone, um, perhaps about test results, perhaps about appointments where certain information may or may not have to be revealed. So just calling individuals and how that confidentiality exists. And certainly there are protocols associated with that from a front desk staff or a clinician to make a call. Believe it or not, we have a number still of um, healthcare practices, large and small, who the only way that they can actually transmit information from provider to provider, from let's say specialist to another specialist, is through faxing. Why is that? The primary reason is because EHRs, electronic health records, don't talk to each other. And so we have to go back to old school by faxing, but we know the ramifications of faxing. If you're even, some of you even remember those days, that individual personal health information could be left out in the open. It's a very common thing. It has been a very common thing. It still is. Um, in more of a, excuse my handwriting here, but speaking literally to families face to face, whether it be a healthcare representative, that could be a proxy, or other individuals. And this is more so perhaps in, I don't want to necessarily use crisis as an example, but let's say perhaps an emergency department setting, in an intensive care unit setting, where there collectively can be more individuals coming, and the patient itself, the person, is unable to uh, be in those conversations because of the state of their health. And so, that's where layers of confidentiality can sort of get clouded as well, not knowing who to communicate with, or if there's a big crowd, or wanting to talk to individuals in certain locations. So the locations are key. Long time ago, I was tasked to do a short little study to examine breaches of confidentiality in a hospital setting. This is a university hospital setting. And this was about a 1 month long project where it was looking at breaches, and it was actually a fairly easy, not a very scientifically robust study, but what a team of us found, and I was able to work with MHA students on this, are two locations where confidentiality is breached among staff. And by that, I mean where staff reveal confidential patient information openly. First is in elevators. When you think about riding up and down an elevator, and if you don't know individuals, people tend to keep to themselves, keep quiet. But when people do know each other, they talk in an elevator. And even if there's other people on the elevator as well. So the elevators take time, especially if you're going up and down, where you're going from the 10th floor to the first floor. And so even in short spurts, personal health information, private health information can be shared. And the other is open spaces, hallways, cafeteria, dining areas. So this is within, let's say, an organization. Now, I describe a hospital. Some of you are familiar with this as well. Corridors, but cafeterias and elevators are two prime locations that we found in the study where confidentiality is breached. Now, what does that mean, breached? These are clinicians talking to each other, but as family members walk by, as non-clinicians walk by, as technicians walk by, they become, even for split seconds, privy to that information. And it becomes a challenge because the clinicians do have to perhaps talk about these cases. And it's not practical all the time to go to a specific area. So that really speaks to the configuration of perhaps settings as well. So I'm going to keep going. The confidentiality piece I find actually very interesting, but let's move on and speak a little bit about privacy. So privacy is a little bit different. Confidentiality, I think we all know what the information means, but it's viewed as the right of the individual client or patient to be let alone and to make decisions about how personal information is shared. Um, and thus we have the introduction in 1996 of HIPAA. Now, I'm hoping, because I'm 100% positive that anyone who's worked in healthcare has been certified as HIPAA trained, or you've gone through some sort of HIPAA training, maybe 7 or 8 times. But it's amazing how many people actually don't know what HIPAA stands for. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. The portability part of HIPAA, by the way, this was called in an act in 1996 and has evolved ever since, as we'll see with the HIPAA privacy rule. The portability part of HIPAA, portability means to move, really speaks to health insurance, moving from patient to patient, irrespective of state lines, irrespective of jurisdiction. But it's the accountability part of HIPAA that really focuses on privacy. And so the privacy part of HIPAA, which is called the HIPAA privacy rule, you can find it. In fact, I invite you to go to the website at hhs.gov, where I conveniently just lifted this thing from. Um, it does a number of things, and it's evolved over time. The latest addition or modification to the HIPAA privacy rule was quite recently. But it establishes a few things: national standards to protect individuals' medical records, because so much of that right now is where the information is transacted electronically, but it installs certain safeguards. But it more than that, it gives people, individuals, the rights over their health information, which is a really key concept. And I think certainly in very small font, patients are made aware that they can get a copy of their health records, easier said than done sometimes, and to actually request corrections. And those corrections have to be made, or at least noted that a correction is in there, whether a clinician or a set of clinicians agrees with the corrections. And so the privacy rule it's a really big step, really big step. It actually is something that distinguishes American healthcare from most other healthcare in the world, or at least the transmission of information. Um, and HIPAA was really designed because of the advent of moving towards much more electronic means. Now, with that move to electronic transmission of information comes the notion of the third category, which is security. And security is just about protection, right? Protection of health information, and supporting healthcare professionals so they can keep that information in confidence. There's a HIPAA security rule, sort of tagged onto the privacy rule, and that was designed because to really protect individual information in electronic format. Now, we understand security pretty well, but I want to just give you a couple of examples. As I sort of look around my office, I have a very antiquated file cabinet. And file cabinets, which certainly can be locked. I'm not even sure if my cabinet can be locked. I can see a key, but I've never used it. File cabinets were historically where health information were stored, and they were locked, and hopefully the key was put in a secure location, where only select individuals had control over that. And so now we don't necessarily, some offices still do, some locations absolutely do. We rely on other means, whether it be a massively robust electronic health information, whether it be the cloud. And that brings up a variety of other issues. Certainly, we can argue it's more secure, it's more retrievable than going to a file cabinet in a certain location. But it brings up one of the great issues of healthcare or any type of security, which is passwords. Now, I'm taking a wild guess that everybody listening to this YouTube video has a number of, excuse me, passwords for a variety of different logins. And over the last number of years, you have been forced to change those passwords, or it's automatically changed for you. You've forgotten those passwords. You've written them on Post-it notes, which apparently you're not supposed to do. The password protection also leads to perhaps double or triple authentication to verify that it's actually you who is logging into a site. And maybe that leads to an email, maybe it leads to a text message. The password security is one of the number one features. And of course, number one features of electronic security. And it's fairly effective, especially if it's not shared, although there's a tendency to share passwords. And the reality is that sharing happens because of workarounds. What's a workaround? If certain tasks need to be accomplished or maybe shared with parties, all with good intention. One way to work around not getting access to a certain area is to share passwords. Now, password sharing may or may not be, usually it is, in violation of whatever policies exist within an organization. It occurs, it doesn't occur as frequently as individuals think, probably not anymore, um, but it is also certainly the security feature or the idea of there's more of a tendency for individuals to, let's say, forget passwords than to share it. And so these three concepts of confidentiality, privacy, yes, confidentiality, privacy, and security are the three-legged stools of this. And really, the ethical and legal issues when it comes to healthcare are layered upon each other. And so, but the onus is always certainly with perhaps the system to work, but we still rely almost exclusively on individuals of various, let's say, statuses, various education levels, and they come and go. And so there's a lot of upfront maneuvering and training to get people on board. And when people leave, there's almost an immediate dissociation. And so you're, by that meaning your user ID, your password, your access is gone. And and so it really is a means to keep a sort of a tight rein on these three issues. Now, I'd like to sort of end this discussion, but bring up something that has become one of the most common features, especially in healthcare, and it really then brings the confidentiality, the privacy, and the security um, parts of this discussion into play, which is a bring your own device philosophy within healthcare. And so now, certainly anywhere between 60 and perhaps even 90% variety of healthcare organizations allow for practitioners, allow for um, administrators to bring their own device, use their own device, log on to whatever system or network, access clinical information from lab work to diagnostic images with their own phone, with their own tablet. It's a cost saver. It is the challenges really come into play when it comes to security and privacy as well. The benefits are certainly clear. Individuals are comfortable with their own device, comfortable using it, accessing it. It is certainly cheaper for organizations not to purchase a whole host of other tablets, not to maintain it. The security issues, though, are enormous in terms of making sure that there isn't a mix of information, or as individuals step out of the organization, go home, not just not leave the organization, but go home, they still have a secure a sense of security, is because also in their device they're doing personal stuff as well, whether it be pictures or texting. But it merges the worlds of personal and professional here, because as we know, during the workplace there is a merger of the personal and professional. We are doing work on our devices at the same time that we are answering perhaps a personal phone call or sending a personal text message or laughing at a certain picture. Um, Not entirely inappropriate. However, when you're using your own device for work type settings, which is becoming much more the common norm in healthcare, those worlds really merge together, meld together. And so this is really going to be the topic of our discussion board for the week, our only discussion board. And so there'll be a separate podcast YouTube video about that, but we're going to tackle the bring your own device issues, um, and have you sort of provide an opinion based on some of your experiences as well. So that is it for this week. Please let me know if you have any questions about any of the content or the application as well. And thank you very much as I close this down.